Discover the incredible truth behind the King Arthur legends, 7 hidden secrets exposed. Claire Thompson sat at her cluttered desk, the words of the school assembly echoing in her mind like drums of war. The fluorescent lights above flickered, casting a dismal hue over her stacks of papers. The thought of presenting her findings on the legendary King Arthur felt like a weighty stone lodged in her throat. Doubt gnawed at her. Could she really unravel accepted truths without losing everything? At 35, Claire had poured her heart into teaching history at home in Virginia, igniting sparks of curiosity among her indifferent students. She had always imagined herself transforming their understanding of the world, straying from dusty textbooks towards exploration and discovery. Yet as the years passed, the fire inside her slowly dimmed. Colleagues who towed the conservative line dominated the halls, their opinions cloaking her ambition in shadows. She felt the once cheering classroom fade into distant echoes of disappointment. Every dismissed idea was a reminder of the insecurities she tried to hide behind a smile. But that dusty attic in her grandfather's old house hinted at something larger. Sifting through flickering memories, she had stumbled upon an ancient, leather-bound book. Its pages revealed astonishing tales of Arthur. 7 secrets that would shake the very foundations of history, each whispering to her heart and igniting a flicker of hope. Yet hope quickly twisted into a tight knot of anxiety. How could she challenge the very curriculum that governed her existence? The school board, resolute in their traditions, loomed over her like a specter poised to snuff out her dreams if she dared step out of line. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Claire's breath quickened as she began to prepare for the public presentation, her hands shaking while reviewing notes. Doubt seeped into her resolve like poison, whispers of negativity echoing. What if they mock me? What if I ruin everything? Her mind strangled her with fear. Faces of her colleagues, smug and disapproving, filled her thoughts. Could she endure their ridicule? And then, almost as if summoned from the past, her grandfather's letters rose to defend her. They were declarations of courage, his unyielding desire to challenge societal norms. Each letter fueled her once dim aspirations with new fervor, yet the stakes grew clearer. This was not merely about her legacy, it was a larger confrontation against the constraints of ignorance. As she prepared to step onto the stage, the auditorium's air thickened around her. Heart hammering as she scanned the audience, Claire felt the urgent weight of her decision. But just when she thought she could seize the moment and reclaim her voice, a challenge rattled from the back of the room. A familiar figure sneered, sharp as glass. Myriad questions flooded her mind, parallels of humiliation and doubt spiraling. Would this be the moment she either stood tall and reclaimed her truth, or crumbled under relentless scrutiny? It was not just King Arthur's hidden legacy on the line, it was her very spirit hungering for validation and change. The tension swelled within her, her path twisting toward unknown corners, propelling her toward a destiny shrouded in uncertainty. Claire's heart thundered, each pulse an urgent reminder of her decision. She inhaled sharply, pushing back against the encroaching tide of doubt. The raised hand in the back of the auditorium belonged to Robert Larson, a notorious critic, whose barbed words had slashed through many of her ideas over the years. What makes you think your interpretation has any merit? It's just a story, he shouted, his voice slicing through the murmurs of the crowd. The weight of his challenge lingered in the air, a specter wrapped in disbelief. In that moment, the flickering lights overhead mirrored her internal struggle. Claire felt as if she stood at the edge of a precipice, where one misstep could send her tumbling into obscurity. Yet she could also feel the whispers of her grandfather's encouragement swirling around her like an unseen force. This isn't just a story, Claire countered, her voice stronger than anticipated. It's a tapestry of history intertwined with myth, and it speaks to the human experience. If we treat it as mere fiction, we stop questioning the truths that lie beneath. The affirmations began to bubble forth, sharp and undeniable. She searched the audience's faces, seeking a connection amid the uncertainty. Some leaned forward, intrigued, others remained skeptical, arms folded tightly across their chests. But she saw a spark in a few of her students' eyes and zeroed in on it. "I challenge you to look past accepted narratives," she pressed, feeling emboldened. King Arthur's story, his truth, can inspire us today in ways that statistics and dates cannot. It's a legacy of bravery and leadership that is still relevant. The flicker of excitement ignited inside her, pulsing with each word. The air felt electric now, filled with a potent mixture of possibilities and risks. Robert's sneer morphed into a frown, but Claire pressed on. She outlined the 7 secrets she unearthed, inviting them into a world where history and imagination intersected. As she spoke, thoughts rushed through her mind, each secret revealing new layers to not just Arthur's tale but to her own reluctant role as an educator. With every revelation she shared, she began to feel less like a fraud and more like a guide, leading them into forgotten realms of knowledge. Yet, lingering within her was the tension of self-doubt, always nipping at her heels. Would they heed her call, or would her voice falter amidst the noise? Each question unspooled threads of uncertainty she had kept tightly woven inside her for far too long. As the final secret left her lips, she forced herself to meet Robert's gaze. The lines etched on his forehead deepened. This wasn't the response he had expected. The enacted skepticism morphed into curiosity, a battle unfolding before her eyes. A smattering of applause erupted, hesitant at first, but it grew as Claire's heart raced. In that moment, she realized that her voice held more power than she had ever given it credit for. This was not just about her fear of failure or institutional rejection, it was about the passion she ignited in others, reigniting the very purpose that once drove her to this path. Yet even as the adrenaline coursed through her, doubt lingered, gnawing at the edges of her triumph. Could she maintain this newfound strength? The challenge of keeping her momentum alive loomed large, each step forward fraught with unknown repercussions. As she exited the stage, a sense of vulnerability collided with exhilaration. Had she truly planted the seed of change among her students and peers, or had she simply delayed the inevitable dismissal of her perspective? And then, as if the universe had sensed her turmoil, a figure approached her, a student she had unintentionally overlooked throughout the years. With eyes wide and genuine, the student said, "I actually found your talk inspiring. What's next?" Claire's breath hitched. The call for the next step echoed in her mind with stark clarity, shoving her once again into the realm of uncertainty. Claire stood alone in the dimly lit hallway, the echoes of her recent presentation still reverberating in her mind. The room, once filled with critical gazes and skeptical sighs, had transformed. In their place, lingering applause buzzed like a fading melody. Yet, as she met the earnest gaze of the student before her, a blanket of unease enveloped her heart. "What's next?" the student prompted again, breaking through her swirling thoughts. It was a simple question, but one that carried an unforeseen weight. Claire realized she was at a crossroads, a chance not just to respond to her students' ignited curiosity but to redefine her own path. She had confronted Robert Larson and made a case for her interpretations. Now came the challenge of building upon that moment, of taking her newfound conviction and solidifying it into actionable steps. Treading deeper into existential waters, Claire contemplated the possibilities. It dawned upon her that sharing knowledge was not a mere transfer of facts. Instead, it was igniting a flame, encouraging others to explore, question, and become passionate learners themselves. But that flame had to be nurtured, and she would have to step beyond the familiar boundaries of her own expertise. "And there are many more secrets," Claire replied, her voice steadying as she pondered the direction she could take. "What if we created a project? One where we delve even deeper into these stories and explore how they relate to us today." The student's face lit up at the suggestion, infectious enthusiasm radiating from their every word. "Like a presentation or maybe a discussion panel?" "Yes. But more interactive. We could bring in other students, gather different perspectives, and even engage with some historical experts. The more she spoke, the more Claire felt the spark of inspiration morph into a blazing fire. A wave of excitement surged through her, but it was quickly tempered by doubt. Would others share this enthusiasm? Would they see the value in revisiting this ancient lore through a modern lens? As her mind reeled with potential, skepticism gnawed at the edges. It was a risk, a leap into uncharted territory where her comfort zone faded into the background. Yet in that moment, she also recognized this feeling. It mirrored the apprehension she felt before stepping onto the stage, queasy but vital. Claire decided she needed to embrace this uncertainty. After all, it was where innovation lay. Stepping away from a rigid framework could yield a new vibrancy in learning, a connection among peers that transcended mere academics. "I'll need your help," she said to the student, determination threading her voice. "We can work together, this could turn into something meaningful." The student nodded vigorously, excitement palpable. Claire could feel her own heart quickening, not from fear, but from anticipation. Weeks passed as Claire, alongside her most engaged students, crafted a project that would unravel the King Arthur legend. They stepped outside the walls of the classroom, organizing discussions, inviting speakers, and hosting open forums. Each week, Claire observed a palpable shift in her students, their dogged curiosity fueling their passions. Yet with every burst of enthusiasm came the creeping shadows of doubt. Was this idea sustainable? Were they truly unlocking the story's potential, or were they merely skimming the surface? With every critique, concerning glance, or raised eyebrow from colleagues and peers, she felt her resolve tested. Then, during a collaborative workshop, Robert Larson arrived unexpectedly. Observing from the back, his piercing eyes captured her attention, igniting her concern anew. What would his presence mean for their burgeoning project? Claire quickly reorganized her thoughts, reminding herself of the strength she had discovered on that stage. Time to face him, she mentally prepared herself, feeling the adrenaline build as she confronted not just Robert, but the skepticism that had haunted her for far too long. With the stakes suddenly raised, Claire took a deep breath and prepared to step further into the fray. Would she defend her vision or cower under scrutiny? The answer loomed in the air, suspended between tension and possibility. Claire felt the tension in the room shift as she approached Robert Larson, the air thick with unspoken judgments. He had always represented authority and tradition, a figure whose opinions could sway the fate of her project. Her determination to carve out a new path wavered under his gaze, igniting a familiar pang of insecurity. But this time, things were different. She reminded herself of the journey she had taken with her students. They had embarked on a quest for deeper understanding, engaging their peers in meaningful dialogue and exploring uncharted territories. The realization struck her: the value of this endeavor was no longer solely tied to academic approval but hinged on the connections they were creating. "Robert," Claire began, her voice steady though her heart raced. "I'm glad you're here. We've been exploring the King Arthur tales from a contemporary perspective. It's been incredibly enlightening for the students." He raised an eyebrow, unimpressed, and Claire sensed the skepticism hanging in the air. "You think these myths have any relevance today, Claire? You're risking the integrity of history with such loose interpretations." The sharpness in his tone stung, but she refused to back down. "I believe they offer insights into our values and struggles today. We cannot ignore how these stories shape our understanding of identity, leadership, and morality." His eyes narrowed slightly, he was weighing her words. Claire seized the opportunity to reveal the results of their efforts. "My students are not just reciting facts, they're analyzing, questioning, and connecting these narratives to their own lives. Isn't that what education is about?" Robert paused, and for a beat, she felt a shift. Perhaps he was genuinely considering her perspective, or perhaps he was simply masking his disapproval. Either way, she pressed on, buoyed by her conviction. "The stories resonate with them," she continued. "They see themselves in the characters' struggles. We're not just teaching history, we're fostering a critical mindset." The gesture was small, yet significant. He shifted in his chair, attention slightly more focused. Claire took a breath, feeling a lift as her confidence fortified the convictions she was sharing. This was her moment to stand firm, to embrace the tension instead of running from it. Why not visit one of our sessions? You could see firsthand how they engage with the material. I think you'd be surprised by their insights. It was a bold invitation, one that felt perilous yet exhilarating. He considered this for a moment, the tension in the air hung palpably. I might do that, he finally replied, though with an undertone of skepticism that made Claire's heart race again. It was a chance, yet she knew their journey was still fraught with challenges. As the workshop continued, Claire shifted her focus back to the students, watching as they animatedly debated concepts and theories, their eyes bright with curiosity. The visceral energy they exuded forged an invisible connection between her and them, a bond built on shared exploration and discovery. Every critique she faced, every doubt that flickered in her mind, now seemed trivial when compared to the transformation she witnessed daily. They were growing, not just as scholars, but as individuals willing to confront their beliefs. It was a testament to the power of connection both with the material and each other. But even as she felt propelled forward, a lingering question nipped at her confidence. Would Robert's influence stifle their progress? Could she move them past the scrutiny of someone who epitomized the old ways of thinking? The uncertainty echoed in her mind as she laid in bed that night, the weight of their project pressing down like a heavy fog. If she was to face this challenge head-on, she needed to lead, to transform not only her students but herself in the process. With determination surging within, she resolved to gather her team of students the next day, embracing the possibility of failure as a crude stepping stone. They would strategize, reinforce their commitment, and prepare for whatever Robert might throw at them. The stakes elevated, Claire could feel the pulse of possibility thrumming in her veins. She was ready to embrace the challenge and perhaps discover strength she had yet to uncover within herself. Yet, as she drifted into sleep, one unsettling thought lingered. How far would she need to go to defend this vision? The moment of truth loomed on the horizon. Standing before her class the next day, Claire felt the weight of the impending confrontation with Robert looming just beyond the horizon. The workshop room buzzed with her students' chatter, a cacophony of excitement that fueled her resolve, but the shadows of doubt clung to the edges of her mind. She glanced around at their eager faces, bright with curiosity and passion. Each one represented not just an individual but a collective commitment to pushing boundaries. It was this shared energy that had ignited her initial passion for teaching, and now she needed it more than ever to guide her through the impending scrutiny. "All right, everyone," she began, raising her voice above the chatter. "Today, we're going to focus on how we present our work to Mr. Larson. I need each of you to think about what you want to share." The noise began to die down, replaced by an air of palpable anticipation. Claire organized her thoughts as she outlined her strategy. They would need to showcase not just the interdisciplinary connections between the Arthurian legends and modern day but also the intellectual growth each student had achieved through the project. This wasn't merely about defending their ideas, it was about celebrating their journey. One student, Jessica, raised her hand, a hint of anxiety lacing her voice. "What if he doesn't get it? What if he just dismisses everything we've done?" Claire paused. Her heart understood Jessica's fear, echoing the very insecurities that plagued her own thoughts. "We can't control how others perceive our work," she replied, feeling the sincerity of her own words. "What we can control is how we present it. We need to dig deep and be proud of what we've created together." Their eyes flickered with determination as she continued. "Remember the discussions we've had? The connections you've drawn between your lives and the stories? That's powerful. Show him what this means to you." As they broke into groups to curate their presentations, Claire moved around the room, her heart lightening with each discussion. She had created an environment where her students could flourish, a place allowed for their voices to resonate. Their insights were not just valid, they were vital. Minutes blended into an energetic hour, and as her students prepared for their approaches, Claire wrestled with her own internal monologue. She understood Robert's stature as an authority figure loomed tall, but for the first time, she felt equipped to confront that authority with the strength of her team's collective voice. After school, Claire could see her students engaging dynamically with the material, their confidence soaring. Yet as excitement filled her heart, a solitary thought lingered: how could she best defend their vision against the entrenched beliefs that authority figures like Robert held? Would they echo her conviction, or would the skepticism he embodied morph into doubt for her students as well? As the clock inched closer to their scheduled meeting with Robert, Claire whispered a silent prayer for fortitude and clarity. Each passing moment sharpened the focus of her fears, her anticipation both thrilling and terrifying. What if this moment exposed the fragility of her plans? The stakes were impossibly high, but she clamped down on her doubts. When they faced Robert, it would be with everything they had. They had built a narrative worth defending. Claire turned to the students gathered around her, eyes glinting with determination and hope. This is more than just a presentation, it's a revolution in how we think about education. So let us make sure we're all ready to show him just how powerful these stories are and bring our voices to the forefront. As they headed towards the common room where Robert awaited, Claire felt a surge of clarity. This was the moment she had been preparing for. They were about to rewrite not just the narrative of Arthurian legend but also what it meant to learn in their classrooms. But the question hung heavily at the forefront of her mind: would they rise together, or would the weight of tradition prove insurmountable? Claire marched forward, uncertain but resolute, steeling herself against the possibility of defeat as the door swung open ahead. As Claire stepped into the common room, the atmosphere shifted. She felt like an actor taking the stage, with Robert sitting imposingly at the head of the long table, his expression unreadable. The warm light from the windows cast an almost surreal glow on her students, who fidgeted behind her, fingers brushing nervously against their note cards. The energy from earlier seemed to ripple away, replaced by the tense silence of confrontation. "Good afternoon, Claire," Robert began, his voice deep and authoritative. He gestured for her and her students to take a seat. "I'm looking forward to hearing what you all have prepared. However, I must remind you that we uphold the academic standards of clarity and rigor in our projects." Her heart thumped audibly as she sat, taking a moment to breathe deeply. It was almost comical, how Robert seemed entirely unaware of the depth of their passion and dedication. This was not just another presentation to be evaluated, it was a testament to how education could inspire and transform. "Thank you, Mr. Larson," Claire replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "We believe our project on Arthurian legends demonstrates the richness of learning across disciplines, and the insights our students have discovered are truly remarkable." Robert nodded, sinking his attention with a flick of his pen. "That's commendable, but let us see if they can prove that. Students, please present your best ideas, and I will be the judge of whether they meet our standards." As the first student stood, Claire was engulfed by a mix of pride and dread. Each student presented with fervor, weaving narrative threads between ancient tales and contemporary issues, but Claire could sense Robert's skepticism with each slide. Each question he asked seemed to slice through their enthusiasm like a sharp blade, testing their resolve. "Interesting point, Jessica," Robert said, leaning back in his chair as she hesitated slightly. "But how does this relate to actual learning outcomes? Can you quantify the impact of your project?" The question echoed in Claire's mind, triggering the familiar internal struggle. Did he not see the value in these connections? But she refused to let doubt seep in. It was not just a test of knowledge, it was about envisioning education differently. "Mr. Larson," Claire interrupted, gathering her courage, "what we're exploring is not easily quantified. It's about encouraging critical thinking and creativity. This isn't just about data, it's about nurturing the kind of students who will become innovators and leaders." Robert looked at her, piercing blue eyes narrowing as if gauging the challenge. "You realize that innovation needs to be backed by facts and figures, don't you?" The moment stretched unbearably, and as silence enveloped the room, Claire felt a surge of determination. Her students were peering at her with wide eyes, their hopes riding on her response. This felt monumental both for them and for her own evolution as an educator. Yes, she said finally, infusing her voice with conviction. But education is also about storytelling, engaging with content on a personal level. Our analysis isn't limited to tests and numbers, it ignites a passion for learning that statistics alone can't capture. She could see her students nodding and leaning in, their confidence bolstered by her words. Robert pinched the bridge of his nose, crossing his arms, contemplating her defiance. Be careful, Claire. Passion alone won't save a project in this institution. As Claire stared back, a realization dawned upon her. She was no longer just defending her students, she was carving out her own identity as a teacher, one who would challenge the status quo rather than accept it. The meeting was becoming more than just about Robert, it was about reclaiming her voice. But as Robert turned the discussion back to numbers, that question lingered: was passion enough in a world bound by metrics? The stakes felt higher than ever, and Claire's internal compass guided her toward a pivotal decision, one that could redefine her teaching career. The door to uncertainty now stood wide open, and the true battle was far from over. Facing Robert was only the beginning. Would she find a way to meld passion with pragmatism, or would tradition continue to cast its long shadow over modern educational ideals? The following day, Claire found herself replaying the previous afternoon's meeting in her mind, each detail etched into her consciousness like a tape on repeat. The clock on her desk ticked persistently, reminding her of both the fleeting time before the next meeting with Robert and the mounting pressure that came with it. She glanced at the roster of her students, an eclectic mix of backgrounds and talents, and it struck her that this wasn't merely about defending their project. It was an opportunity for her growth, a challenge that would question everything she held dear about education. She grabbed her notebook, pages filled with thoughts about Arthurian legends and her students' competing interpretations. The legends were rich with symbolism and moral lessons, and in hindsight, they mirrored her own journey toward understanding the essence of teaching. With renewed determination, Claire decided to work with her students, not just as a guide but as a learner herself. They arranged an after-school meeting, their energy palpable as they gathered around the table, eager to share ideas and clarify doubts. Claire encouraged them to dig deeper into the connections they saw between ancient tales and present-day issues. It was exhilarating to watch them flourish in their insights. Think about what we discussed, she encouraged. What if the passion isn't just about creativity? What are the lessons these stories hold about conflict, loyalty, and leadership? How can we frame those in our project? As they brainstormed, Claire felt a shift within herself. The discussions injected life into her pedagogy, transforming her approach from a rigid adherence to academic standards to a more fluid exploration of ideas. She saw potential in every glimmer of thought that surfaced around the table. Yet, doubt still lingered in the recesses of her mind. She sensed a precarious balance between valuing tradition and pushing boundaries, much like the protagonists in the stories they studied. Each character grappled with their own narratives and destinies, and this vision resonated with her current plight. Ms. Smith, I still think Robert may be right about needing data, Jessica said hesitantly. We need something concrete to prove we can also be rigorous. Maybe we can create an interactive element that showcases real-life implications, another student suggested, eyes brightening with the thought. Investment in the project took on a new meaning as Claire hopped from idea to idea, diving deeper with them into the potential of qualitative evidence, personal stories, interviews with family about their interpretations of the legends, surveys that captured student engagement. Their project morphed from static presentations into a dynamic exploration of shared experiences. Claire allowed herself to take a step back, observing her students animate their work with fervor. They were making discoveries she hadn't anticipated, aided by her guidance but propelled by their collective motivation. This was a learning journey for all of them, one that embraced vulnerability and collaboration. Even as progress flourished, the echo of Robert's skepticism still loomed large. How would he respond when they presented a project that defied conventional metrics? Would he value their heartfelt connections over data, or would he dismiss their efforts entirely? Claire knew she had to prepare them not just for academic scrutiny but for the possibility of rejection, a reality they might face if Robert remained unconvinced. This was a critical moment, testing their resolve and pushing Claire to face the deeper implications of what it meant to create an educational experience that valued both passion and rigor. The day of the presentation loomed closer, and her late-night reflections began to coalesce into strategies. It was a delicate dance, navigating traditions while heralding the transformative power of genuine engagement. But in the bright light of education, Claire felt a shadow stretching behind her, one she needed to confront. Would her best efforts to redefine education through this project be enough to withstand Robert's gaze, or would they falter under the weight of his expectations? The challenge of the upcoming meeting ignited her resolve further. She felt an urge to prepare beyond mere content, to find a voice for the stories that shaped not only the legends but also the very fabric of the students' lives. It was time to prepare. This time, however, Claire was ready for the conflict. The real test was about to begin. Would she emerge victorious, transforming expectations into a new framework for learning, or would she falter and lose her chance to reshape her identity as an educator? The workshop atmosphere buzzed with a mixture of excitement and apprehension as the date for the presentation drew near. Claire's students approached the final stretch of their project, and she felt the weight of that anticipation settle heavily on her shoulders. They had invested themselves in every detail, but Claire was acutely aware that their creativity might become fodder for Robert's critical lens. How could they articulate their heartfelt connections without succumbing to his demand for measurable results? In preparation for their presentation, Claire allocated time for a group rehearsal at the university library. She arranged the seating to foster collaboration and open dialogue among the students. With a central table strewn with their visual aids and notebooks, they began sharing their sections, merging personal insights and the critical themes they had unearthed from the legends. Remember, this isn't just about what you present, Claire emphasized earnestly. It's about how you share what these stories mean to you. Dig deep, let them see your passion. Robert needs to understand its significance, not just the data. As they practiced, Claire found herself becoming less like a teacher and more like a spectator, observing her students rise to the challenge. The transformation from hesitant adolescents to confident speakers was abrupt and striking. Each student's voice radiated authenticity, and with it, they showcased not only their findings but their journeys. Their surveys had yielded rich testimonials and poignant stories that wove together the fabric of their project. Yet the nagging feeling returned, the shadow of Robert's expectations looming ever larger. What if all their efforts were dismissed? What if they were not merely misjudged but misconstrued? The pulse of self-doubt thrummed in her mind, pushing her to question her teaching philosophy. Had she cultivated an educational experience worth defending? In the midst of this turmoil, a moment struck her: she would need to communicate her own belief in the educational exploration they had undertaken, not simply as a defense but as an embodiment of her practice. She needed to confront the inherent tension between value and rigor head-on, illustrating to Robert that education was not a linear measure but a kaleidoscope of experiences and growth. The following day, as they gathered for the actual presentation, nerves surged in Claire's stomach like rising tides. When they entered the meeting room, she could feel the weight of Robert's gaze, his skepticism almost palpable in the air. Her students shivered with excitement and apprehension, whispering reassurances to one another while Claire stood resolutely at the front, centered in her dual role as mentor and collaborator. After introductions, the students took turns sharing their insights, each one more passionate than the last. Claire felt herself nodding along, every story touching her core. It became evident that this project was not merely an academic exercise but rather a vivid tapestry of human experience, so much richer than any standard rubric could convey. But just as the presentation reached its peak, a powerful narrative about a local family's interpretation of loyalty in the tales of voice pierced the atmosphere. "Interesting," Robert interjected, "but how do you quantify these experiences? They seem subjective. How can we trust these findings without tangible data?" A silence fell over the room, heavy like a weight pulling at Claire's resolve. She could feel the confidence of her students start to falter. But then a spark ignited within her. This was the moment to rise above the mere question of metrics, to pave the way for a deeper kind of understanding. "Robert," Claire began, her voice strong despite the quivers in her stomach, What if education isn't meant to be distilled into figures alone? What if the real truth lies within these narratives? Join me in seeing their worth. The challenge of the moment was palpable. Claire could sense that this confrontation would shape not only their project's success but redefine how she positioned herself as an educator. The air inside the meeting room thrummed with tension. Claire had stepped onto a precipice, ready to either balance herself or fall into the depths of doubt. What came next could either shatter her resolve or solidify it in the eyes of Robert and her students. As Robert leaned back, evaluating her assertion, Claire held her breath, knowing that how this moment unfolded could change everything. Claire's heartbeat quickened as Robert's gaze flickered over her. The room felt suspended in time, the air thick with unspoken responses and learning's heavier implications. What came next would either challenge or reinforce the educational philosophies she held so dear. I understand your concerns about metrics, Robert, she pressed on, determined to steer the conversation towards a deeper analysis of value. But we can't overlook that education often flourishes in the spaces between quantifiable outcomes. These stories, these experiences, they evoke empathy. They connect us to a shared human experience that data alone simply can't convey. She sensed the shuffling of papers, her students exchanging glances among themselves, searching for the seeds of her conviction. As Robert leaned forward, his brow furrowed, Claire felt a fleeting moment of vulnerability. Did she truly believe what she was saying, or was it just an act of desperation in the face of his staunch criticism? Empathy, indeed, he replied, almost with a note of condescension. But when you say shared human experience, what weight does it carry? How can we generalize these insights? Are they even replicable? His skepticism radiated off him like heat from a forge, putting her on the defensive. The back and forth was invigorating but unsettling. Claire realized that beyond defending her students' work, she was being pulled into a personal reckoning. Could she really articulate the worth of qualitative data of heart and connection within a system so heavily reliant on cold facts? Focusing on the students who now sat quietly, wide-eyed and hopeful, Claire felt a shift within herself. The fear that had tangled in her gut began to unravel as she embraced the serendipity of this confrontation. She had not just entered a battle for her students but was navigating her own transformation as an educator. Perhaps we shouldn't think of it in terms of replicability, she continued, pushing through the mounting tension. Each story is unique, yet they resonate with universal truths. This is where education thrives. It's an exploration, not a march toward rigid conclusions. It's about letting ideas breathe. Her conviction rang through the charged space. The room pulsed not only with nervous energy but an undercurrent of solidarity. Students shifted in their seats, their expressions shifting from trepidation to inspiration as she spoke. Robert remained silent, assessing her carefully. Claire took that moment to gauge her students' reactions. Vulnerability and determination danced in their eyes as they absorbed her sentiments. Education isn't solely a mechanism of performance or outcomes, she affirmed, her voice unwavering. It's about cultivating critical thinkers. If we only measure knowledge through standardized assessments, we lose creativity and authenticity. Isn't that our true aim as educators? Just as she finished, a ripple of applause erupted from a corner of the room. One of her quieter students, recognizing Claire's earnest appeal, took the lead in a spontaneous show of support. She's right, he said, his belief shining through. We learned so much more than what's written down. The stories changed us. Claire's heart soared, aware that this was just the beginning. She had inadvertently unleashed a wave of student advocacy, restoring their collective strength. As tensions began to soften, Robert cleared his throat, visibly taken aback. But just then, Claire noticed the flicker of uncertainty behind his stern facade. Was he reconsidering his rigid stance? In that moment, Claire made a decision, a commitment to not just fight for her students but to reinforce her own identity as an educator who believed in depth over mere breadth. The discussion continued, but now it felt transformed. The energy shifted from conflict to potential collaboration. Claire found a new resolve building within her, recognizing that this wasn't merely about the outcome of the presentation but an evolution of her professional persona. As the dialogue deepened, she realized she had not only advocated for her students but had also taken a step toward redefining her own understanding of educational value. But amid these unfolding revelations, a subtle unease lingered. Was this newfound confidence an act of transformation or merely a fleeting moment of clarity in the face of persistent doubt? Still, she could not ignore the weight of impending consequences. Just as Claire prepared to steer the discussion into a broader exploration of educational philosophy and its applications, Robert's next question reminded her that this was far from over. And if the world wants to change, Claire, are you ready to change with it, or will you stand your ground? The room stilled once more, the tension crystallizing into a moment of clarity that spoke volumes. This was truly a crossroads, and Claire's answer could very well shape her future both personally and professionally. In the days following their intense confrontation with Robert Larson, Claire Thompson felt a steady shift within her. The nervous tension that had accompanied her teachers' meetings now transformed into a deep understanding of her role not just as an educator but as an innovator in her field. The echoes of her students' passionate pleas still reverberated in her mind, filling her with an unexpected confidence. Claire knew that addressing Robert's hard-nosed perspective on educational narratives was only the beginning. She realized she had to build momentum from that encounter, not allow it to fade into obscurity. Taking charge of her newfound vision began with tangible action plans. It was not enough to walk away with merely a successful presentation, she needed to construct an ongoing dialogue about the multifaceted nature of learning. Inspired by her students' insights and the principles behind the King Arthur Project, Claire began to organize regular workshops intended to bring forth creative investigations into history, literature, and ethics through interactive storytelling. This wasn't about rigid curricula, it was about igniting an intrinsic love for learning where students would collaboratively delve into materials that resonated with them personally. The change was palpable. Students who often faded into the background stepped forward, eager to contribute. Claire facilitated an environment that encouraged inquiry, pushing them beyond static definitions of success. Each workshop was tailored by the very students who once doubted their school subjects and themselves, transforming Claire's classroom into an energetic hub of creativity and collaborative discovery. Yet, even with her students' enthusiastic participation, looming uncertainty shadowed Claire. What would Robert's final verdict be? Would he embrace this progressive approach or remain shackled to tradition? Claire resolved to invite him to their next workshop, hoping to shift his perspective through first-hand experience. The day arrived, and as Robert entered the room, the atmosphere quivered with anticipation. Claire introduced him to her students, setting the stage not merely for observation but for engagement. "Mr. Larson," she encouraged, "we love your insight on how the discussions evolve. Your experience can guide our journey." Robert's stern demeanor softened slightly, yet skepticism danced in his eyes. As several students presented their findings from their latest workshop, a profound shift began to unfold. Claire watched as the initial wariness in Robert's stance morphed into thoughtful engagement, his curiosity seemingly aroused, challenged by the interspersed calibrations of their research and storytelling. Time passed quickly, and reflections followed each presentation. Robert began to ask questions not for the sake of critique but out of genuine interest. How does the interplay of these narratives show our understanding of contemporary issues? He probed, shifting from analysis to synthesis. Claire seized the opportunity, highlighting their critical thinking process and the significant growth each student demonstrated through this project. After the workshop, as students gathered their belongings, Claire felt a surge of relief and pride. For the first time in a long while, self-doubt took a back seat. The connections being made in that room spoke volumes, illuminating the bonds that breathe life into education, the power of collaborative narratives, shared struggles, and triumphs. Several days later, the formal feedback from Robert arrived. Claire stood anxiously as she opened the email, her heartbeat thudding loudly in her ears. As she read his words, each sentence unfolded like petals from a blooming flower. A scathing critique was replaced with an acknowledgement of their revelations. He praised the project for its depth, noting how it sparked insightful conversations about human experience across time. His final conclusion hinted at support for broader changes in the curriculum, advocating for educational paradigms that fostered imaginative explorations. In that moment, Claire felt not just validation but vindication. She had ignited a transformation, not only within her students but also within the rigid walls of institutional education. Her path, once shadowed by doubt, now glowed brightly with possibilities. With renewed vigor, Claire decided to share their findings beyond the confines of the classroom. She organized a community presentation to showcase the work her students had undertaken. Inviting parents, local educators, and other critical stakeholders, she ensured that the legacy of King Arthur brewed a discussion that lay well beyond ancient myths, tying to modern-day leadership, courage, and empathy. The event garnered attention and applause. People shared stories, insights, and most importantly, began to seek out Claire's approaches actively. The demand for her workshop series grew palpably. It was not enough to alter one classroom, the tide was shifting throughout her academic environment. Standing there, receiving feedback and encouragement from familiar faces, she realized how far she had come. Claire had evolved from a hesitant teacher battling insecurity to a confident educator leading a classroom revolution. She had taken fear and transformed it into a passionate narrative of change, one cemented by recognition from both her students and peers. In that crescendo of personal achievement was clarity. Claire no longer sought to validate her worth through the approval of traditionalists like Robert Larson. Instead, the affirmation flowed from witnessing her students flourish, their curiosity awakened and voices amplified. They were not just consumers of knowledge, they were creators, co-navigators of their educational journeys. With each passing day, Claire became part of the dialogue that fused innovation with tradition, ensuring that the future of education was not a relic of the past but a vibrant tapestry of exploration and wonder. Defined no longer by the constraints of her doubts or the expectations of others, Claire emerged, a beacon of confidence. She had conquered her battle and redefined her purpose and position. And as she often communicated to her students, the journey has just begun. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending below. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share.